Can you talk a little bit about the origin of sort of this show, the idea of bringing all these different characters from the two universes together?
I think it was like a fever dream of the network president, Mark Pedowitz. I mean, it was, it sounded too good to be true. Like when I first heard about it, like it just seemed logistically impossible to do like an ensemble action show on network television, and so it was the sort of thing that like I couldn't believe it was actually happening, and still kind of can't believe that it's actually happening. But yeah, it was all sold on the basis of that sizzle reel that you guys have probably seen and will be seeing again today.
What was the process of sort of selecting which characters from these shows and then which new characters we want to introduce with this show?
I mean, the way I look at it is just like if you were doing like a reality series and you were trying to choose for the maximum sort of volatility, like the most unstable sort of configuration of characters, instead of just doing like Justice League where you had like everybody who's essentially, they're different but they're all working for the same thing. We just wanted like maximum chaos. So just trying to figure like who would be the most disruptive element to add to this like soup. And so it's a very like anarchist sort of mentality behind the show, like what's the maximum amount of just like chaos that we can create like interpersonally between our characters.
How did you select the cast?
Oh man, that was Greg Berlanti, who's been doing this a while. I think basically went through his Rolodex, if people still use Rolodexes, and just like called in a lot of favors. And it is this sort of critical mass thing that like once you have talent, it's easy to get more talent. And so it's sort of like, well, geez, Victor Garber's doing it. It can't be like, and then Wentworth Miller, and then Arthur Darvill, and then before you know it, you're just like, you have this sort of critical mass of people who all believe that, like, wow, if there's this much talent, it has to be something special. And it really is. It took on a life of its own where you're just like, oh my God, I can't believe that these people are actually agreeing to do this. Like, I hope they know the madness that they've signed up for.
There's a spectrum of how to tell time travel stories on television. If like 12 Monkeys is maybe at one end with like serious cause and effect, and like Doctor Who at the other end with like more like time and space. Can you like place where Legends of Tomorrow might be at?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I don't want to name shows, but there have been things where the sort of the dramatic narrative falls apart under the weight of trying to like justify the sort of astrophysics of it all. And like, I think Back to the Future was probably the first film that I ever like saw like 4 days in a row in the theater when I was a kid, and to me that was like the perfect balance of like, it makes emotional sense. And if you can look at a Polaroid where somebody's disappearing, that's all the explanation I need to explain the physics behind it. Our show doesn't dwell on sort of lengthy deliberations of, it doesn't, if your head starts to hurt, it's probably means that you're not following the parts of the story that you should be following. I mean, there are parts of our show that get very philosophical, but it's on a human level, and I think it is about sort of trying to save the world, but it's also a meditation on like, if you could go into your own past, if you could change something in your own life, if you could look into the future, what would you want to see? And so it's meant to be much more on the human scale, because everything else of our show is so like writ large. The action and the sort of concept is so big that in order to ground it, there have to be things that are very plausible and relatable. So yeah.
Circling back to talking about the interpersonal relationships, I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about the characters. Do they not want to work together? Do some of them want to work together? Are there different degrees of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I will say this: like by the end of the first season, like we've had characters who gravely wounded, if not dead. We will have people betray the team, in irredeemable ways. And part of the that it is sort of an anthology show, and it's not designed to go in its current incarnation for 5 seasons. Like most, network television, it's sort of rinse and repeat. And how can you tell the same story without, changing the DNA? But that's not what we're doing with this show. It's really, these 16 episodes are meant to be a serialized sprint to a finish that will leave the characters changed forever, and or season 2, if we're blessed with one, will look nothing like season 1. And so that's one of the fun things about the show is you're able to introduce things that are so cataclysmic that you couldn't do it on a normal sort of procedural show where everybody has to be back to square one next week, and all the bruises are healed and all the horrible things that were said have been forgiven. That's not our show.
Can we expect?
Go ahead.
Can we expect about a participation of Oliver or Barry during this season?
Whether we'll have crossovers with those guys, we certainly will, and we would have more if not for the fact that those two gentlemen are killing themselves on their own series. But we will, it's our intention to return to Central City and Star City, either in the future, the past, or both, and try to imagine alternate worlds in which, to me, that's kind of half the fun of doing this show is imagining what Star City looks like in 30 years, and what the consequence of our team having left it would look like, or the butterfly effect of doing one tiny thing in the 70s. What does that mean in the present? I think stories, back to your question about what kind of time travel, the idea of what leaving this device in 1950, what would that mean for the post, I think that's cool. That's the kind of geek stuff that I really like to imagine.
I just want to ask about Firestorm real quick. It's one of my favorite characters. When you realized that Ronnie Raymond was not going to be available, let's just say that, why the choice to not reintroduce Jason? Why introduce a whole new character as Martin's partner?
Oh, I don't know. That all of those decisions sort of predated my involvement with the show.
Is that sort of a bigger DC decision?
No, this was just I didn't come on as showrunner until after the ship had sort of sailed. But I worked with Robbie before my first show, Tomorrow People. So for a second I was like, oh, this would be so great to work again. But I gotta say, I'm really excited about it's that's all I'll say.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.